Hi, welcome to another session of Tea Time, hosted by the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition. Today, our guest is Alexander Rubian, and he is the Director of Community Affairs and Urban Outreach for the New Jersey Second Amendment Society. Thank you for being here with us today.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. So what we're going to talk about today is the Second Amendment. And first, let me read the Second Amendment for everybody who's out there, because we often talk about the Second Amendment, but we don't often hear exactly what it says. It reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." So, we're constantly having this argument in the United States about what it really means. So, as one of the directors of the Second Amendment Society, what is it that your organization believes and upholds about the Second Amendment?
Well, it couldn't be more clear than that of how it was written, and we spend a lot of time and effort trying to manipulate what it actually means. But it's very clear in black and white what it actually means. It's for the ability for the people to defend themselves in whatever means possible and protect their natural rights against a criminal behavior or a tyrannical government.
And it's interesting because a lot of people who want to argue the point that that the Second Amendment is not, relevant in today's society, right? We hear a lot of that from individuals on the other side who are against the Second Amendment, believe people shouldn't have any firearms or should be limited. But not only is it very plain, if you look at the history and you look at the Federalist Papers, and you can clearly know the intent of the Founding Fathers in terms of they made it the Second Amendment because they felt it was important. And they talked about, in order to secure, a free state, because they knew the history of what it was like for people who didn't have any defense against a federal government or a state government that was out of control.
Well, that's exactly it. I actually can relate with that on a personal level, because in 1959, my mother had to flee Cuba with her family, and as the government became tyrannical and basically took away all their property, confiscated and seized everything they owned, and they had to flee Cuba in defense of being able to protect their rights, which were the ability to be able to own property, to be able to defend themselves. And that was done throughout the history of Cuba by taking away the arms of the people. Now, on my father's side, it was also very, very personal to me, because my great-grandfather and my grandfather were survivors of the Armenian genocide.
Wow.
And we understand what happened when a government turned on its people and became tyrannical. So we had this discussion many times where people, unfortunately, they can't really relate with that. And when I try to explain to them my family stories,
right,
of what happens that when a government turns against its people, how they will actually be able to overpower them. And that's by having a defenseless community and society that cannot retaliate or be able to defend themselves against a tyrannical government.
I think, unfortunately, we have people who just live in two different worlds. And you have people who will never believe this story, and they'll never believe that it could ever happen in the United States. You have people who still are in denial about 9/11. So you have these individuals who probably will never get it, and can't understand the importance of it. They think of firearms as something that's savage and unnecessary, and we have a police force, and even if we're talking in simple terms, it just being able to defend yourself. I speak to other women and I say, we're in a culture of victimization, where we talk about women being victimized, and the statistics are off the charts about how women are harmed daily, and have no way to defend themselves.
Well, I'm happy you brought that up because 1 in 5 women will be sexually assaulted throughout their lifetime, which is staggering to think about that as a statistic. I actually became very involved with it, understanding the importance of the Second Amendment, not only because of my family and what happened to them, but also on May 25th of 2011, I was walking home one evening, and 20 feet behind me, 3 criminals attacked a man that was walking home from work as well, ended up shooting him and killing him, and for weeks I had to walk by his mural where the the wife and the children were begging for assistance because he was their sole provider. Now in New Jersey, I don't understand how anyone can explain to me how our laws are morally superior to being able to allow an individual exercising freedom and liberty to be defenseless in the event that they were ever attacked by a criminal.
Well, I agree with you 1,000%, because they never want to highlight the stories where individuals have been able to thwart the threat.
Exactly.
And to be able to defend themselves. And they like to believe that police can be everywhere. The reality is that they can't.
Exactly.
And the reality is it only takes moments for someone to kill you.
Exactly.
So, and I give an analogy all the time that, we often, the people who are anti-Second Amendment, and we have people who either just want to truncate what you can own to people who absolutely believe nobody should have any type of firearm because for some reason it threatens them. But we can get into that portion of it later. But they never really have an answer for you when you say something like, what about people who live in more rural areas where there's just a state police force and there's literally no one coming when you dial 911, literally.
Yeah.
Or people who, they argue having assault rifles or semi-automatic rifles. What about all those people who are on the border of, Arizona and Texas who literally have drug dealers who are running across their property? What about them? So are they just supposed to be like lambs to slaughter and have no ways to defend themselves or their family?
It's funny you bring that up because as we started testifying in Trenton, I came home to having a lot of people emailing me, and one of the stories that really came out to me the most and really affected me the most was a woman from Texas that lived in the southern side of Texas, and now they moved to Ohio, and it was kind of interesting that she was from Texas, now she lives in Ohio. And when she explained further, she said that the criminal behavior there was so rampant that it was just happening everywhere that she feared for her life and her family's life. And she didn't want to jeopardize that, so they had to move away. So this is once again how we create this free-for-all for these criminals to be able to do whatever they want. Meanwhile, the government wants to create laws that only law-abiding citizens are going to abide by. So how is that being a system that's going to help the people? Because the police are not going to be there everywhere, at every waking moment. So this is kind of difficult for a lot of people to understand. How, by creating laws that only law-abiding citizens, for instance, the limitation on ammunition capacity in a magazine in New Jersey being reduced from 15 rounds down to 10 rounds now, please explain to me any criminal that's going to abide by that, or any criminal that's going to go to the gun store in New Jersey and buy a New Jersey legal magazine.
Well, even every instance that they cite, it's never anything that has to do with someone who's actually abiding by the law. They're not legal handgun or firearm owners. They're not, none of them.
Yeah, exactly.
So, or there are extreme instances where we have the mental health issues, and everything that we've seen in the news most recently has been about more so mental health issues, and unfortunately their weapon of destruction or choice happened to be a handgun or firearms, but it could have easily been anything else. When we talk about the young man in the theater in Colorado, he used firearms, but he also rigged his entire apartment with explosives. If someone wants to harm someone, there are many different venues in which to do that.
Exactly. And we've become infatuated with the how instead of the why.
Right.
And that's one thing we're just becoming very just content with saying, let's demonize the tool and not the individual.
Let's talk a little bit about some of here in New Jersey. The legislature just passed, 22 bills. Is it the bills they passed? That, of course, the governor has to sign into law, and hopefully
it's in the Senate's position.
It's in the Senate position.
Yeah.
So, can you highlight maybe one or two of those that you find particularly offensive?
Well, I think they're all offensive, so I can't.
Well, just pick one. Just pick one.
Well, for instance, I mentioned before the magazine capacity being reduced down to from 15 rounds down to 10 rounds. Why should the government dictate to me what my capacity is in defending my life against a criminal that's not going to abide by the laws?
Right.
They're going to use whatever magazines they possibly have. Maybe a 30-round, 100-round, or a 10-round.
Right.
Now, why should the government tell me how I can limit the amount of times I can defend my life? Now, it's not necessarily my concern, but it's the concern of my loved ones. There's a lot of women that might not be that competent with use of a firearm to the extent that, let's say, a high-level trained sniper might be in the military.
Right, you need a couple extra shots.
Yeah, we need a couple extra shots. There was a case where there was a woman defending her family with a sole home invader coming in, and she had a 6-shot revolver.
Right.
And she ran to the upstairs, locked herself in the room, and the man broke down the door, charged after him, and she unloaded 6 rounds and shot him. I believe it was 4 out of the 6 times and missed twice.
Right.
Now, the man who actually lived and was able to leave the house and get in his car and take off. But what if there was multiple intruders? What if there was 3, 4, 5 of them?
Well, and I think that's, I mean, it's unfortunate we have to discuss it in this way, but there's 2 things. Often, a single shot doesn't stop someone unless you are excellent and shoot them in the heart or shoot them in the main artery or shoot them in the head and drop them. I mean, the other thing is if someone is coked up or if someone is on some type of a drug, a lot of times you can't stop them.
Yeah. But in my opinion, I think that's kind of feeding into the argument.
Right.
That's still outside of the foundation that the government should not infringe on our rights and limit our rights in being able to defend ourselves in whatever situation possible. I've been confronted by a mob of between 10 to 15 people on the street walking home from work, and why should my limitations be distinguished by what the government thinks I should use?
Yeah,
What if there's case after case in New Jersey, home invasions that go on daily with 3, 4, 5 criminals, and that's the new style of doing it. The criminals cannot bypass the alarm systems in a home, so now they're targeting homes when the homeowners are there, they're having dinner, and all of a sudden 3, 4 people bash through the door with baseball bats, knives, guns, whatever weapons they can find in any standard hardware store or any illegal market, and they are able to invade people's homes that way and steal and rob and do many worse things.
Thank you, Alexander. And when we get back, we'll talk a little bit about how do we define freedom. And for everyone out there, please remember to visit the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition website, which is njteapartycoalition.org. And we look forward to seeing you guys in a few moments.
With all the excitement happening with the Tea Party, it may be a little hard to separate fact from fiction. Find out the truth for yourself. Visit the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition's website at www.njteapartycoalition.org. You may find a common voice to your concerns on how our government is functioning and discover a means to help restore our nation based on the proven principles of our Constitution.
Welcome back to Tea Time, hosted by the Tea Party Coalition. And today we're talking about the Second Amendment with Alexander Rubian, who is the Director of the Community Affairs and Urban Outreach for the New Jersey Second Amendment Society. And we're going to start this section talking about how do we define freedom, so... So how do we define
we
freedom?
have to ask ourselves like a real fundamental question is, what is freedom? Is freedom something that we're born with? Is it something that we have to fight for? Is it something that we earn? Is it something that's issued to us? And if a certain group frees themselves but they enslave others, is that morally just? So a lot of people never wonder about these issues, and I don't think they really can understand it until all their freedoms are taken away. Now, I can tell you what we have in New Jersey is not freedom.
Right.
It's definitely not freedom.
So what would you describe? Like a soft tyranny that we have in New Jersey? Was that how you would describe it, or?
Well, I don't like to label it. It's just something that if we took our individual choices and our individual liberties, which is to be able to act as our own agent and be able to be responsible for our own actions, then I would feel that we don't have that ability in New Jersey.
Give me an example of that.
Well, an example, for instance, is I cannot have the ability to defend myself outside the home.
It's true.
Now, one of the most vital thing anybody has is their life. And now how do we defend that in New Jersey? We expect the government to take care of us. But if you look at murder statistics and the crime rates in New Jersey, clearly there's a problem there with government being able to provide that service. And with the recent layoffs that New Jersey's had and across the state with police officers, that even concerns me even further.
So right now, in New Jersey, like we talked in the first segment, we touched a little bit on some of the laws that they're trying to pass, but we also know that New Jersey already has some of the most stringent firearm laws there is. It's just some of the things that I can think of off the top of my head. There's, when you purchase ammunition, you are often limited. I don't know whether or not that's state legislated or not, but I know that you can't purchase as much as you want when you go into a store. I know you also have to provide them with your social security number. You have to fill out some extra paperwork when you do that. In addition, you can't order anything online unless you can't purchase ammunition online and have it shipped to New Jersey unless you provide them with your identification.
Exactly. Anytime you want to purchase any type of ammunition, the retailer, maybe an online store or a store out of the state of New Jersey, requires that you fax them a copy of your driver's license and your firearms identification card, also known as your FID card. Now, there's legislation in Trenton today that is going to mandate something that's already mandated. Right. Now, that's one of the things that is just a reaction to the current events that have occurred, and it's just classic feel-good legislation that doesn't really do anything in making our streets safer. Another one of the bills is that they want to mandate that the firearms identification card have a photo ID on it.
Right.
Now, you already have to provide your license with your FID card, which is making it redundant now.
And it has your fingerprint.
And has your fingerprint on it, exactly, as well. So that is not going to do anything with making our streets safer, reducing criminal activity, but all it's going to do is infringe on the rights of the law-abiding citizen to have to take more days off of work to get issued a new firearms card, go down to the the police department, be fingerprinted again, probably pay a lot of fees.
Yes.
So, how is that being fair to the law-abiding citizen? Now, I was speaking to a police officer today who told me that the computer system to issue and to do the mental background check has been down since Superstorm Sandy.
Oh.
And it may be between 3 to 6 months before they have that computer back up. And now this is already based on a system that it takes approximately 30 days on best case scenario when somebody originally applies for their firearms identification card, up to 8 months, as we've had some people report to us. Yes. So for me, for a person that understands what freedom really is, a right delayed is a right denied.
I agree. So what can we do? I mean, we always talk about, or I guess, why do you think that people are still kind of living in this free society when every day we look around and more those freedoms are being usurped?
It's interesting you bring that up because I had a friend of mine, she was studying for over a year in China. And when she came back, I ended up having lunch with her and I was asking her about her experiences there. And she told me how shocking it was how people keep their heads down, They don't challenge any authority, and they don't even understand how they don't live a free life because the government does everything and controls everything in their lives. And she said the scary part is that they don't even recognize that.
Do you think we're getting closer to that? I mean,
absolutely. I think eventually it'll lead to that. You know, I have friends of mine today that don't think it's unconstitutional to be stopped and frisked and have their, person being violated and searched without any probable cause. And now we have legislation that is going to allow police officers to come into our home, search our home, and under their discretion state if they think it's fit that we own firearms.
Well, that on its face sounds like it goes against the Constitution. I mean, I think probably the biggest problem we have with the legislators at the state level is that, number one, they've probably never read the Constitution. And if they did, they obviously don't respect it. And that they have little to no knowledge of how anything works functionally.
Exactly.
Just listening to some of the legislators who've come out on the state level, as also evidenced by the bill that they proposed, they're pretty much ignorant in terms of what the actual process is for a lot of these things.
I think that's putting it politely, but given our experience that we had in Trenton, where we've had Chairman Maynard telling us that this is his meeting, he'll conduct it however he likes, as well as telling us why don't we vote on the bills, and then we'll listen to the testimonies after, which is which is absurd. I mean, that's pretty bad. So do you think that they themselves are either drunk with power or really just don't understand? I mean, in terms of just your dealings with them that you had. Unfortunately, this is not something that happened overnight.
Right.
This is, in my opinion, something that's been happening for years now. And it's no fault to our own, because everybody's been doing what they should have been doing.
Right.
They've been raising their families, they've been working, they've been starting businesses and expanding businesses and enjoying the fruits of their labor.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I will say, I think as citizens, we do have to take a little bit of responsibility. I think that, a government by the people, for the people, part of our responsibility is to be educated citizens. And they do make it very difficult because they kind of keep us on a treadmill, keeping us busy trying to keep up with our daily lives and do the things that we need to do in order to exist and survive. But it's really our, just like when we talk, we'll talk a little bit later about, the Second Amendment being the last line of defense. The people are the last line of defense in terms of making sure that we vote in people who really have our best interest in mind, and not trusting them so much, because we we're hoping that we were putting good people in office.
Of course, I mean, it's we the people, not we the government.
Right. So I mean, I agree with the larger thought, but I think we do have some responsibility in how we ended up here.
Well, we have to reach. We started this organization only a few years ago,
right?
And currently we have thousands of members across the state. In Trenton, we've mobilized within 2-3 days over 500 people to come and testify in Trenton. And then 2 weeks prior to that, or less than 2 weeks ago prior to that, we had a rally that had well over 1,000 people there. And given the weather, we would have probably had between 2,000 and 3,000 plus people. So all big things have had small beginnings.
Right.
And that's something that we cannot lose hope in and faith in. Because if we cower, then we're going to all fail. And it's about just being able to reach out to your neighbors and just have meetings, discussions about what freedom should be, if the government's doing the job they should be doing, and how we can make things change.
And so what of, the New Jersey Second Amendment Society? What are some of the things that you guys are doing, and what is the core? I know it's around the Second Amendment, and is it also around the education? What are some of the
Absolutely.
things
We're doing enormous community outreach programs, speaking to people about what their rights are, speaking to people about how they can make a change. Because it's funny, when you speak to the individual, they tend to agree with you,
Right.
and they don't like which way government is going. And we see that with the polls today, with Congress having the lowest approval rating in history. So it's about engaging the community, your neighbors, your relatives, your children, and to really understanding why the Constitution was there in the first place. The Constitution, it was not there by accident. It wasn't put together by old-fashioned, antiquated mind, thinking. It was there as a progression of revolting against oppressive governments that have been existed for hundreds and thousands of years. So when people talk to us about the Constitution and say, well, it's over 200 years old, don't you think we should update it? They don't understand really what the founding fathers that put this together, what their true intentions were,
Right.
and what they left. So, this is how we have to have these discussions and talking about what a tyrannical and oppressive government is. What role should government have in our lives? Should government tell us what we should be eating, how large of a soda we should drink, how we should be able to defend ourselves? Those are the questions that these people should be asking. And if they start to think for themselves, then they'll always resolve to liberty and freedom.
So when we talk about the Bill of Rights, right, which I'm going to read off the paper what you wrote here. The Bill of Rights granted nothing. So you want to expound
Absolutely.
on that?
The Bill of Rights only stated what our natural rights are. And that kind of goes in line with what I meant about freedom. When we're born, do we have to have the Bill of Rights to define what we have as natural rights?
Right.
If the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, for instance, never existed, do I not have the ability to speak freely? Do we not have the freedom of the press? Do we not have the freedom of assembly like we have in Trenton?
Right.
So those are our natural rights that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, confirm for us and put on paper saying these are inalienable. These can be never taken away from us.
And do you think people understand that?
I like to be optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to think that we do. And I think that with the proper outreach, with the proper education, people can restore what America originally was.
Wow, that's a great way to end on an optimistic note. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the
coming.
opportunity.
It was a pleasure to have you. Again, everyone, please be sure to visit our site. We'll have a link to the site to the New Jersey Second Amendment Society, as well as we'll have our tape up. And please visit the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition. Have a good evening.